these workshops have been designed as a bridge. It's about enabling practical green discipleship for Christians who care about God's creation. They're designed to be informal and participative, and we're looking to build on the momentum of things that people have passion about and experience about. We're not trying to have lots of clever PowerPoints, but we're hoping to get more people involved in the sessions. And if you've got an idea for something you think practically in discipleship terms we should be taking forward, and particularly if you've got some expertise that you can help to share with us, that would be great. Let us know the idea and send me either in the chat or send me an email. I've sent you the from the invitation email. You can lead a session, you can be part of a session, we can interview you. There's all sorts of different ways of getting the information out and shared. So with that, I'd like to introduce to you Adrian. I think at this point, Adrian, it'd be good if you said hello so people can see who we're talking about.
Hello.
Yeah, it's good stuff. As you can see, Adrian's not exactly a highly boasting person. So let me say on his behalf that this is a senior bloke and originally an engineer, pastor for 8 years, speaking French, and the designer of the models that we're going to see. So of the models I've seen doing the sort of carbon footprinting, it's the best I've seen. So Adrian, you clearly have the brain the size of a planet. Thank you very much for participating in this. Do you want to?
Thank you.
Do you want to sort of tell us about yourself a little bit, if I haven't stolen your thunder too much?
No, that's good. Well, hi everybody. It's really great to see so many of you. Stefan and I have been talking about this webinar for a little while now, and one of the things he wanted me to mention was the time I spent as a pastor before working with Climate Stewards. So from 2001 through to 2013, I worked in Belgium, in the French-speaking half of Belgium down in the south. 18 months learning French. When we went out there, I had kind of schoolboy French, and when I came back, probably schoolboy French, but a bit better. We spent five years, well, 18 months for language learning, 3.5 years working as pastoral assistants in a church in a town called Libremont, which is near Bastogne, famous for the Battle of the Bulge. And then 8 years actually as the pastor of the church where I'd been a pastoral assistant. And reflecting on kind of doing this this webinar tonight, one of the things that was interesting for me was that in the whole time that I was a pastor, I never once talked about the environment. So I preached every week for 8 years, well, probably a few weeks off, and we never spoke about the environment. I preached on creation, and it was always the backdrop for what God was doing with humans. A bit like a theatre more than anything. So we were the main players, and the whole of creation was scenery. And I look back on that now. We moved back to the UK in 2013 for health reasons. And I joined Climate Stewards in late 2013, and my eyes were opened, and it was kind of shocking really how much I didn't know when I started with Climate Stewards. We joined a church in the town we're living in. We live in Frome down in Somerset, and we joined the Baptist church there, and that's where I actually met Caroline Pomeroy, who is the director of Climate Stewards. And she was keen green, and she'd spoken to the pastor, and he kind of got on board with talking about creation care, about the environment in the church. And that was, again, totally eye-opening for me, because I'd never come across that in church in the whole of my time, even as a pastor. And looking back, part of it is you think, wow, I kind of really dropped the ball. And I also thought it would have been really nice if someone said to me, hey, Adrian, can we do that? Can we talk about creation, and not just from the point of view of what we get out of it, but as in what the importance of it is to God? And for me, going into a church with suddenly wasn't the pastor and other people were talking about these things, it made me realize that actually, as a pastor, one thing that's really cool is when someone says, can we look at this? Can we think about this and do it? I like to think that I would have taken that on board if someone said it to me. I have my own responsibility, of course, to do something about it in the first place. But the fact that we can encourage leaders to even think about this issue is really quite an amazing opportunity.
Oh, thank you very much. One of the things I wanted to do was just share just a reflection in terms of the discipleship and sort of green discipleship. What does that mean? And the story that came to me was in Luke 10. Normally we know it as the parable of the Good Samaritan. And I was going to talk to you about why we need to be good neighbours to one another, that climate impacts have impact on our neighbours, and therefore our neighbours are the farmer in Ethiopia who doesn't get the seasonal rains. I've seen that personally. The Bangladeshi whose land is flooded, the peasant who lives in Nepal whose water is running out in the winter because the glaciers are gone. Go into all of that good classical stuff that I guess have been trained in, and I was really hit by the passage when I was praying about it, that because in the story, while all that's really relevant and important, it's a story about how an expert in the religious law met Jesus, and he was quizzing him on eternal life, and they get to this thing about you have to love God and love your neighbor, and then the man asks, who is my neighbor? And Jesus tells a story, you know it all really well, about a traveler who on the way to Jericho gets mugged and beaten up, and then there's the two so-called good people who do nothing, and the seriously badly rated Samaritan takes care of him. And this is the story of the Good Samaritan, how a baddie, does really good stuff, and the goodies don't do supposedly good stuff. And Jesus then asks a really question which I saw in a new light. He says, which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? And the thing that really hit me as I was thinking about this tonight, blew my mind, is that Jesus is speaking of the traveler as the first person. He's saying, who is the neighbor of the beaten up traveler? So in my whole way of thinking about this, this is about who's doing the heroics, but Jesus isn't just coming to this from a place of the great example of the Samaritan, but from a place of the traveler having others do good to him and then doing likewise. It's not about proud do-gooding heroics, which fits with our sort of individualism, individual sin, personal salvation, personal good deeds. It's about mutual dependency and vulnerability. And it's fundamentally about a story about how humans need each other. The traveler's neighbor was the Samaritan when he was vulnerable. It's not about what we each have to individually achieve. And sometimes this carbon footprint stuff can get really heavy because the guilt starts piling onto you because we've got to be a hero. But we have to do it together and individually. We do it together and we help each other. And that's why I think, and it's that attitude we can take as we think about carbon footprints. So I'm not proposing to have a discussion about that right now. Let's open that up shortly. But what I'd like to do, Adrian, our plan was first of all to have a go on screen with the personal calculator that Adrian, you've done. You're going to help me work out my 2019 carbon footprint, Adrian. Is the plan? Yeah, okay. And some of the actions. Then we're going to have some questions, and we've had a few through. Then a bit of a poll, and then what we'd like to do is take you through, not in the same detail, but just show you the calculator that Adrian has done, 360 carbon for churches, which is being used by Eco Church, being rolled out for thousands of churches. And we want to do that because we're hoping you're really going to influence the churches you're in and get them thinking about these things as well. Does that sound okay, Adrian?
Yep.
So do you want to sort of, should we try and do the footprint and just show how the calculator works? You want to sort of take
let's give it again. I'll
hopefully
start sharing my screen.
Hopefully I've got the stats. I can answer the questions.
Okay, this is, I'm assuming everyone can see this. This is the carbon calculator I've developed for climate stewards. It's available on our website. I've kind of set it up slightly differently for this evening so that people can see it without the rest of the website around it.
And this is on the Climate Stewards website. This is
on the Climate Stewards website, yes, yeah. under offsetting, which we will possibly talk about a little bit later.
And Climate Stewards being a Christian-based sort of greening carbon solutions business charity.
Yes, that's us.
Okay, great. Yes. So 2019.
2019. So one of the first things when we come to carbon footprinting that we try and encourage people to think about is what we call baseline. So if you want to measure your carbon footprint over time, it's often a good idea to start with taking a whole period, a whole year, and saying, right, that's where I'm going to start, and everything I do after that, I'll compare to what I did that first year. So if you want to do 2019, that becomes your baseline year, and everything you do after will build on that. The calculator, as you can see, is divided into a number of sections. We've tried to kind of hit the major parts of the average carbon footprint.
So do you want my sort of what I've flown and what I've done?
Yeah, let's see what you've been up to. Where have you been?
Okay, well, I'm ashamed. Well, we had a business trip in 2019. We had to, two of us in our business had to go from Heathrow to Calgary in Canada.
Okay.
I'm really nervous about this part. It was a return trip, as you can see.
Calgary and Canada. Okay. And that was two of you?
Calgary, yeah.
Yep. And I'm guessing you came back. And did you fly economy?
We did. We did fly economy, yes.
Okay.
So what does that happen?
So that's going to give you a carbon footprint of just over 4.5 tons.
We had a holiday, and we flew from Birmingham to Bergen in Norway.
Okay. Birmingham to... So I have to hope I can spell Bergen.
You're doing well. That's the one.
And that was two of you again?
Two of us, yeah.
Yep. So calculate that.
So that's the flying we did. So
that's the flying.
Flipping. Yeah.
So
wow.
grand total just over 5.2 tons.
Okay.
So what we'll do is we'll pop that into the basket, which will give us a summary a little bit later on. And as you go along, you get a built-in little summary at the bottom that fills in the details of each of the segments. So the next section is travel. We call it on the ground because, well, it's not flying. We can look at cars. So we got some.
So we got two cars.
Two cars. So your first car
is probably it's a Volvo. It's probably a medium V40. So diesel. Probably it's 50 miles per gallon.
Right. Yeah, we can do it by type, or we can do it by fuel consumption. So let's go for 50 miles per gallon diesel. And how many miles did you travel in that?
Well, again,
2019?
Business vehicle as well, so it's 20,500. So quite a lot.
Okay, 20,500.
And then my wife. Well, we also have a second car. We had a second car, which was a little Mini, and it's probably a petrol, 40 miles per gallon.
Yep. And how far did you travel in that one?
4,000.
4,000.
Yeah.
Okay. For
so that
information.
So the fuel consumption was 40.
Yeah. Okay. We'll go for fuel consumption of 40. Okie dokie. 4,000 miles. One thing it's worth sort of thinking about is actually there are averages, so it's always nice to compare yourself to the average, and also see kind of how you fit. So for the average mileage in the UK for most people is between 7,000 and 8,000 miles per year. But for you, Stefan, that gives you, it's going to take a second to think about it, a carbon footprint of just over 7 tons for your driving. Let's pop that into basket. If you take any kind of public transport, we can handle that as well. So have you been doing much on the local bus?
In the middle of nowhere, so the bus doesn't really work. So we have a train. We probably did 500 miles.
Okay.
I did, yeah, down to London and stuff.
So that's, you can see that's probably one of the cleanest ways to get about. So we'll pop that in as well. After that, we then look at home energy.
Okay.
One of the things we built in here is you can, if you're on a renewable tariff, you can put the percentage, which for most people, if they're on renewables these days, is actually going to be 100%. And then, although you say in gross terms there's a footprint, for you personally, there's a net footprint of 0. And again, talking of averages, last year, which is the last year for which there was kind of information available, most households in the UK were using around 3,600 kilowatt hours of electricity and just over 13,000 kilowatt hours of natural gas. So again, that gives you an idea of where you might be situated.
Okay, so electricity,
yep.
I checked out the meter, we were 3,100 kilowatt hours. And it wasn't, I'm ashamed to say, renewable that time.
Okay.
It was just SSC standard rate. And then we heating oil. Again, we live in the middle of nowhere. There's
yep.
no gas. So we had 2,900 litres of heating oil.
Okay. Let's pop that in there. There we go. So your heating oil has kind of kicked you through the roof.
Wow.
So we'll pop that in. So
okay.
Your footprint's going up.
Can everybody go offline now? Okay.
Right. With the next 2 sections are slightly different. The previous section, so flights, transport, and home energy, are all based on emissions factors, which are kilos of CO2 for any given activity. Food for this one is actually based on some research by a professor at Oxford University who looked at diets across the UK and basically worked out what the carbon footprint of an average meal is, or an average day's food. It breaks down into, obviously, you've got your vegans, your vegetarians, and your fish eaters. But for meat eaters, he discovered there are 3 different types. You've got your low meat eaters who eat less than 50 grams of meat a day. Medium meat eaters who eat between 50 grams and 100 grams. And then your high meat eaters who eat more than 100 grams of meat a day. It actually turns out that the average person in the UK who's not vegan, vegetarian, or pescatarian actually is in the high meat eater category by default. So, Stefan, how much do you eat?
We have been trying to do something, having been probably high meat. So I reckon we're probably 2 days on low meat.
Yep.
We have fish once a week. We have vegetarian 3 days a week, and we're probably vegan 1 day a week.
Okay. One thing to point out,
there's 2 of us.
And there's 2 of you. Try to be a little bit smart. So if you don't put in 7 days for your week, then it won't let you carry on.
Unless you're fasting.
Unless you're fasting. Okay, I'm gonna have to go back and build that one in.
Prayer and fasting is an important part of a Christian discipline, you know. Yeah, okay.
I'm going to need a new category, aren't I? You can, as we're talking about 2019, we'll do it for a whole year, but there is the option to do it across different time periods as well.
Yeah, I love it. Okay.
Let's have a look at your food. So for the pair of you, you're coming in at just under 3 tons.
Okay.
Carbon dioxide per year. So let's pop that in. Now this tab here, this is brand new. I'm afraid if you go to the Climate Stewards website and look at our calculator, this isn't actually there yet. So you're getting a preview of what we're working on, which should be going live next week, as long as I don't break it between now and then. This is to allow people to kind of think a little bit more broadly, beyond the things for which there are just emissions factors, to look at what are typically called embedded emissions. So the emissions that are associated with the things that we consume, the things that are actually often hidden from view. And they use what are known as proxy emissions factors, which basically relate the amount we spend on a service or a product to the carbon emissions of that activity. Of all of them, it's kind of the least exact science. It's based on a lot of kind of data behind the scenes that I'd be very happy to talk to anyone about, but I could probably bore you witless about it. But that data behind the scenes is aggregating a lot of information. So the results you get when you start putting in the numbers here are estimates and give you a good idea of the sort of order of magnitude, but then they're not as accurate as the figures for flying, driving, heating your home, or even for food. But they're a very useful way of getting an idea of your sort of lifestyle impact.
Great.
And because you haven't seen this before, I'm guessing you haven't got any data on this one.
Well, to be honest, I sort of did lots of reading, and they reckon it's sort of between 2 and 3 tons a person is sort of the typical. So I've sort of put in 5 tons for the two of us on the sort of the blue sky overall embedded carbon, all the things we buy. You know, you buy a new car or whatever.
Yeah, that would be.
Is there somewhere you can put that in?
Yeah, we can.
Next tab maybe, or what?
We have an extra tab which is on the end here, which is for other. So you reckon 2 tons?
I reckon five. Well, 2 to 3 each, probably 5 for both of us, I would have thought.
Yep. Okay. So we can pop that into the basket. If there was expenditure, that would obviously appear along the bottom as well. And then that is your footprint. We've now got, again, this is new and hopefully working, a complete summary of your carbon footprint. You can have a look at all of the details through the different segments, and kind of an idea also of the proportions of your where your energy or transport or flying, how much of your footprint that makes up.
Wow. So if I'm just gonna, what I'm getting here, how much is 32 for our household?
Yep.
And 12 is in travel, and 12 is in heating and power. So the great majority is it's gas and oil and all that fossil stuff.
Yeah, I think particularly your heating oil is always gonna be high. If you're heating on heating oil, you're directly burning fossil fuel.
So I mean, slight cheat. Before we ever met, I got your calculator, and at the end of last year, could you try this? We switched our electricity to a renewable supplier, and we got rid of our 2 cars and we bought an electric.
Right.
What does that do to the numbers?
Okay, you got rid of both cars.
Yeah. we said we can stand without the inconvenience.
Yeah.
And then, so, yeah.
Let's make sure I've got rid of both of them. So we'll take them out. And you switch to renewables. So let's get rid of the old version. So let's go back to the energy first. That's the easy one.
Energy goes up to 7,000.
Oh, up to 7,000.
Yeah, so, because I'm spending more, there's more energy going into the car, doing 20-odd thousand miles a year. But it's all renewable power.
Okay.
The heating oil's still there, so
yeah,
that's 2,900.
So we pop that back in. So just switching your energy usage has brought you down a fair amount. And we need to go back and look at the cars there. Yeah. So what kind of mileage were you doing in the...
So we're now doing 20,000.
And that's electric. In electric.
And it's...
Okay. Now there's emissions associated with even with electric cars. That's mainly because the emissions factors that we're using take account of some of the, particularly the losses in getting the electricity to you for your car. So there's this tiny bit, you can see it's very, very small in comparison to your last one. And so you've just got one electric car.
One electric car, yeah.
One electric car. Let's pop that in then. Okay, so your carbon footprint has dropped from over 32 tons down to 24.
Wow.
Fractionated just by those two switches.
Oh. Okay. I mean, that's really helpful, and it really says that the real thing I need to work at now is that how I heat my house.
Yeah.
And I guess how much energy goes into that, and so for me, it's the black stuff, it's the dirty stuff that really is causing the carbon, isn't it? I mean, the food we've made some stuff on, and I suppose there's what we buy is also key. There's some really interesting questions that we worth coming back to that have been coming through on the feed as part of this. Can I just get to those? I mean, this is the generic calculator, and I think we're planning to have some specific sessions. I mean, one of the ones, Andrew, Craig, you've asked, with meat eating, does it make a difference whether you eat beef, pork, or fish?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
The answer is yes,
beef is the worst. I don't have the numbers directly in front of me, but from memory, I think beef is has three or four times higher emissions per kilo of meat consumed than any other meat. So poultry or pork, lamb, anything like that. So beef is right up the top. A bit lower down, you've got your lamb and pork. A bit below that, chicken, and then fish. Kind of depending on the fish, kind of hovers around your chicken sort of area.
Yeah. And if we became completely vegetarian then and grew our own veg, which is a question that Kathy Barton's asked, what would happen to the numbers?
Well, if you're growing a lot of it yourself and you became vegetarian, this section of the calculator actually becomes slightly irrelevant because your footprint effectively drops to zero. If you're growing it on land you own nearby, you're doing it in an organic fashion, and if you're transporting it, I guess there's sort of transport emissions you might want to take into account. But effectively, you're going to be carbon neutral if you're living off your own produce.
And that would be a great workshop to have in itself. I mean, one of our members, Marisa Mann, has offered, I understand, to give us some tips there. Maybe that's one of the ones we need to put in there. But if I was just a vegetarian or just a vegan, even how much does that do it? I mean, I really went extreme.
It makes difference.
Would be tough for two of us, yeah.
So vegan, your hair over 1 ton. Vegetarian comes up slightly. And then if we take our...
no, but that's for 2 people. So I was at 2 point, was that 3 before?
So yeah, you're currently at... Let me... I've got a bit popping up here, so I can't get back to the basket. Okay. So currently your food is at
2.9.
2.9. Going 100 vegan.
And 2 people.
For 2 people is going to bring you down to 2.1.
And that probably is because we've been trying to be flexitarian. So there's a lot of my other sins are on the table here. We have been really trying to cut, partly because my son became a vegan and he was living with this, and it just got us waking up to some extent. Okay.
But if you're full on meat eaters, you'd be hitting 5.25 tons between the 2 of you.
Now, if we do have a session on food, which would be really good, what would be really great is to open up some of the detail, because one of the really sad things I did, Adrian, was I actually took all our shopping for 3 months, added it all up, found a professor fellow who had done the work by food type. We discovered we ate 1.1 tons of food a year, multiplied it all out with all the various rates, and it came to 3.1. So I was quite pleased with your model when it came up with the right with a close number. Okay, that's really helpful. So let's just go through the other pieces here. So John and Sharon have said to everyone, you can switch to a supplier that only uses renewable source energy, like Octopus. We went to Octopus, and one of the great things for the electric car is that that charges at between 12:30 at night and 4:30 in the morning. Got a rate called Octopus Go. As a result, we pay 5 pence per kilowatt hour, which our little car is 100 miles of traveling. So that equates to just over a penny a mile. So that 20,000 miles of traveling costs us £240. Now, you've got to have a car that can do it, and currently they're better highly priced than they should, but there are options which would be good to sort of test that other ways. Okay, right, so I think we should open up, what do you think, Adrian? Should we open up some questions now?
Yeah, happy to.
And I see, make sure I haven't missed anyone.
Yeah. I just noticed Andrew Craig's comment about BP. He's right. This current model doesn't discriminate. It doesn't take account of the type of meat you're eating. It's based on the research. It's based on, he kind of took a wide variety of different meals. I think with the takeaway from his model is that basically the more meat you eat, the higher your footprint's going to go up. But you're right, Andrew. It doesn't discriminate.
Yeah, I mean, thinking that, as I learned, was that beef and lamb, if we can cut that out, we'd save a ton, or say half a ton, on our carbon footprint of 2.9. Okay, so that's good. Let's see what we've got here. You can, so Octopus, Kathy Barton, I missed that. Maybe we should, Kathy Barton says, do you get a bonus if you have solar panels on your roof?
This version doesn't. It is coming. It's in the pipeline. So for energy, yes, we're going to be adding, there are emissions associated with actually using solar panels, on the basis that there are emissions from their production that are then kind of amortized over the life and the typical usage of solar panels, but that is very small, particularly compared with what you put back into the grid if you're on that kind of system. So yes, you can end up negative. Okay, so you can technically be negative, which would be great.
Colin McCulloch says to everyone, the EAT Lancet Planetary Health Diet gives them meat, beef, etc. emissions, I think. Yes, there are absolutely statistics. And what I think would be really good is we can pull out some of those stats. Because, so, look, what this does is it gives you the big picture of, to me, of where is the main part of the carbon footprint to take action on. And piece by piece, we have to, you get a more and more complex model. And you think, Adrian, if you're going to try and map everything, but if we can get the big lumpy pieces, we can actually start making progress and refine the others as we go through.
One of the things that I've now been doing this Climate Stewards for coming up on 7 years, and when I joined, I inherited the original Climate Stewards calculator, and we decided it needed a bit of work. It's not rocket science. We're taking numbers that are publicly available, multiplying them by kind of the amounts of an activity to get a number. What we wanted to do with the calculator is kind of, like you say, map out the shape of an average carbon footprint, and give people an opportunity to think, okay, I've got this carbon footprint, how am I going to reduce it? So even for those who are on renewable electricity, there's advantages to thinking, even though I'm on renewables, how can I reduce my consumption? With driving, how can I reduce my driving? Now, I think Stefan mentioned right at the beginning about how we can tend to feel guilty about carbon footprints. One of the things we don't want to do is make people feel guilty. At Climate Stewards, we have kind of a phrase which is reduce what you can and then offset the rest, because there are limits to what we can reduce. We're not all going to be able to do the same thing and get to the same point. So we want to be completely guilt-free and realistic about what people can actually do, and encourage them to make the changes that they can change.
And can you just take me through as well? If I see there's the pay now, I can actually give you money, and you're going to take away my guilt. Is that the thing? Is that just guilt? Is that cheating?
No, we hope not. It comes back to this fact that you can't get to zero. One of the things we haven't featured on the calculator, but which is a part of every person's carbon footprint in the UK, is government. Whether you love them or loathe them, government provides services across the country that has a carbon footprint, and that's something we can't get rid of. Of course,
they will sort that out.
Oh yes, I mean, I was actually yesterday. One of the things I get to do for my job is look at very full spreadsheets of numbers. And we were looking yesterday at the historic electricity consumption in the UK, which wasn't thrilling, but was quite interesting to see actually how much energy is produced in the UK and who's using it. So last year, there's something like 300 gigawatt hours of energy produced. Households consumed about a third of it. Business and industry consumed just over a third of it, and the other third went to government and services. So there's a part of our carbon footprint we can't easily get rid of.
Can I ask you, there's a bill adding up here. If I give you this money, what are you going to do with it? Is it like if I give Ryanair £1 to offset my flight to Dublin, and they say they can offset it? What do you do with it?
What do we do? We fund offset projects in the developing world. So currently we have, I have to think, seven different partners. We have tree planting projects in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. We do something called Biosand water filters, which are a way of avoiding carbon emissions. People in the communities that we're working with prior to receiving a filter would boil their water, which was costing them money, was putting pressure on local ecosystems. And by having a water filter, they basically reduced their fuel wood consumption.
So what I'm hearing is you're investing it in African projects, giving them jobs and employment.
Africa, also in Nepal with cook stoves. They're going out to very, very rural communities. And we've also very recently started a project in Peru, also with cook stoves.
Okay, I'm looking at the time. I'm very keen to let people escape after an hour. And I see there's some great questions rolling through. Andrew Craig makes the point that actually the actual electrons coming through the socket to power his television aren't going to be any different if he goes to Octopus.
No, they're not.
But it's about where the demand sits, and so it'd be nice if there was a filter and only green produced ones that actually get through. But it's a very, very good point.
Yeah.
And yes, and then Colin talks about the averaging of food miles, and I think we need a specific session on how food miles work and how we see in season food as well, and which ones cause an issue and which don't. So unless somebody wants to really go for it, Colin has talked about How Bad Are Bananas, the book. This is so good, this book, by, what's his name again? I can't read it.
Mike Berners-Lee.
Mike Berners-Lee, because so many of the questions, and I think people like Andrew and others have asked questions, are in there. You know, how much carbon in production of your washing machine? How much does it actually cost to import food and some of those things? Yeah. And I'd like to look through, and there's a great debate going through here, which I'd love to sort of try and tick everyone. Is there anyone particularly you want to grab? Because I'd quite like to do a poll as part of this, just to ask people what focus sessions they'd like to do next. So do you want to sort of just have a quick skim through that list while I do the poll? Would that work? Adrian?
Yeah.
Let me just, because I'm aware of the time. So I'm just going to ask you now, I put in a number of the options for workshop here. And I'd just like to ask you to look and vote. Which ones are you really interested in hearing more about? And in particular, if you've got some expertise and knowledge about these areas, which ones would you separately do let me know? Can you see that? Is that on the screen now? No? Okay, so numbers are moving. Why don't you have a look at the questions? Okay. I'm going to close the poll now. Great. So I'm now ending the poll. I just took a screenshot. So I'm going to share the results. So the biggest issue here is, how can my church become net zero carbon? What a great intro to the last piece, Adrian, that we were going to cover. But that's really helpful. Please let me know if you have particular knowledge about some of those and you'd be interested in participating, not just attending, but maybe you can share some of your wisdom in this as well. So I'm going to stop this. So before we go and just look at the eco church work that you've done, Adrian, on 360 carbon, any particular ones that you think you should pick up on that list?
Yeah.
So many good ones.
All of them.
Well, I mean, we could reconvene, I guess. and working. But I was hoping that we work on specific sub areas and build on these questions as sort of a separate session.
Yeah, which one to choose? Oh my goodness, so many incredible questions. Helen has asked about the carbon footprint of a new electric car. I don't have any numbers to hand. There is always the question with kind of switching cars is what's going to happen with the old one. When we moved back to the UK from Belgium, we bought a Peugeot 308, and it was diesel because that's what we thought we ought to buy with the kind of mileage we thought we'd be doing, and because, well, just everyone bought diesels. And I was recently looking at what, should I switch over to an electric car? And we worked out that for us at the moment, given costs and with the current age of our car, that we'd stick with what we got. We'll run it into the ground because we're in the very fortunate position that we have very low annual mileage. And my thinking, apart from the economics of it for us, was that someone else getting that car, and particularly getting a diesel, might end up doing 15, 20,000 miles a year and actually be doing more damage than me doing my journeys. So for us, for the moment, sticking with the car we have is going to work out better. I hope one day we'll be able to get an electric car. But there is a carbon footprint that comes with a new car. It's generally speaking quite a big proportion of its lifetime emissions. But again, compared to internal combustion, it's going to be smaller. And
Mike Berners-Lee book, he goes into it. It's great. He says that a small car is 8 tons, a medium car is 17, and a Land Rover Discovery is 30. And as you say, they run it over 10 years, and it's a small part of the total. And they're going to have to go net zero as well over time. There's going to be a key driver. But I think what I'd like to really explore is have a session where we look at electric cars as an example, because I think somebody was saying they've got a Nissan Leaf, Jeremy Plummer, and he really likes it. And so you can get a second-hand Renault, is it Renault? I can't remember what it's called, or a Nissan Leaf 6,000-7,000. If you've got small mileage, there are different solutions, and we can look at that next time. Oh, we've had to push on because I'm very keen to get this done in the hour. Why don't you talk to us, Adrian, about the eco church thing? I don't know, you're not going to go through the whole thing now, but you're going to try and just give us a flavour so we can agitate with our ministers and clergy and whoever else to see what the art of the possible is.
I'll share my screen. This will be dumping you all in a little bit at the deep end. So 360 Carbon is we've called it a collaborative carbon footprint calculator for churches. The idea being that rather than one person sitting on their own and trying to work out their church's carbon footprint, they get a whole bunch of people involved. So if you sign up for an account with 360 Carbon, which is at 360carbon.org, the first thing is you'll be invited to create a group, which is you and all your mates who are going to help you. An organisation which typically is going to be your church, but it's fairly flexible. And then you can get on with doing carbon footprints. So as I mentioned, baselining right at the beginning, that's another feature of 360 Carbon, is to encourage churches to start with a baseline year. At the moment, given the current situation with COVID, we would suggest that if you start using 360 Carbon next year, you don't choose 2020 as your baseline year, because it's going to be really, really weird for a lot of churches. So this follows a very, very similar format to our individual carbon footprint calculator. One of the aims is to get people, or to allow churches to see the impact of their activity. So we could give you a sort of straight carbon calculator where you just work out your church's carbon footprint, but we want to put it into the context of actually what your church is doing, on the basis that actually the church with the lowest carbon footprint is the church that is closed. So if your church is engaging with your community, you're doing lots of stuff, there's a possibility that year on year your carbon footprint will actually increase. You'll do some of the kind of low-hanging fruit of changes that you can make, but there's a good chance that your carbon footprint will get bigger over time because you're doing more people are coming through the doors, there's more activities, more going on. So the first thing we encourage churches to do is actually tell us about the church itself. What are your activities? What are you up to? How many people are kind of coming in, going out and using the church building or church sort of facilities? And that means that when we get to the end, we can actually give you a carbon footprint based on the amount of time the church is used, and a carbon footprint based on the number of people who use the church. After that, it follows very much the same path as the individual calculator. We have energy. And as you can see, we do have solar. So that's going to be appearing in the other calculator relatively soon. Transport is handled slightly differently. The idea is that you will talk to people in your church and find out what kind of mileage they're doing for coming to and from church. Now, we're very conscious that there's potentially an overlap, which is that people coming to church, if they're doing their carbon footprints on another calculator, they might include their church mileage there as personal footprint. So you might want to, none of this is obligatory, none of it is, you don't have to do any of it, but bear in mind that if you do travel, people coming to and from church, there may be some overlap. You can either do the kind of the basic version, or we have a more detailed version if people are doing have lots of different means of getting there. And you'll notice that we have some very low carbon options. We've got bicycles and on foot. That's mainly so churches can see actually how many people are coming by those means of transport, and again how that increases over time as people take on board teaching in the church about the environment. One of the things tools like this and activities in the church can do is people change their change behaviour based on what they see. Yeah. For food, it's a very similar approach. The meals fall into the same basic categories as you saw earlier, but we thought we would also include some of the sort of the favourites of typical Sunday mornings. Did this recently with a church, and it turned out that in an average month they got through 400 cups of tea, 400 cups of coffee, and 100 soft drinks. And they also claimed that they only got through 5 packets of biscuits, and I don't think anybody believed them. We then have expenditure. It's slightly different from the version in the other calculator because we're trying to get to different things, things that are more associated with how churches will work. And then finally, waste and water. So this is to allow churches to think about actually what they're doing with their waste. And again, this tab will be coming to the other calculator in the very near future. Wow. And then at the end, there's not going to be anything here, but there would be a summary in a very similar format to shown on the other calculator.
Wow.
So that is 360 Carbon. It does have a built-in user guide, so lots of information for those who really want to kind of geek out on that stuff. It's all in there.
Wow, Adrian, I mean, perhaps we should just, if you close that, I just want to really thank you for a really interesting session. I want to